At the Nuremberg trials, there was one defendant who was referred to as an indignant lout, who refused to go down without a fight. Robert Ley was the head of the German Labour Front, and he was a senior figure inside of the Nazi government. But Ley was someone who was very unpredictable, and he had a very sharp tongue, as well as a number of other issues. But his behaviour at the Nuremberg trials, briefly, attracted a number of specialists to consider if there was something seriously wrong with him. He had a severe stammer, but Robert Ley, who was furious with being charged with war crimes, would escape any form of punishment, as 3 days following the charges being levelled against him, he died by his own hand, inside of his prison cell, creating a noose from a towel, and securing it to a toilet pipe that ran through his cell. However, following his death, his brain was cut out from his head, and was then sent for analysis. But what was found about this senior Nazi's personality from this, and his actual health, was remarkable and also shocking, and could have led to him avoiding any form of justice. Today we look at opening the brain of Robert Ley, and to support please make sure to subscribe. Robert Ley had served for the German army during the First World War, and he saw action on the Eastern and Western Front. But in 1916 he was promoted, and he then trained as an aerial artillery spotter. He flew in many different planes, but in July 1917 his aircraft was shot down over France, and he was taken as a prisoner of war. But in this crash it has been theorised that he suffered a significant traumatic brain injury, as following the crash he spoke with a heavy pronounced stammer and muddled his words, and he was also said to have become a very erratic person, and he also turned to heavy drinking, which made his behaviour stranger and more serious. Ley was brought up in relative poverty, and he joined the Nazi Party early on in March 1925, and he did grow close with Hitler and sided with him on relatively anything. This led to him becoming the editor of the anti-Semitic Nazi newspaper, the West German Observer, and he was elected to the Reichstag and rose throughout the different party offices. He was there when Hitler became the Reich Chancellor in January 1933, and specifically went with Hitler to Berlin for this, and he was promoted to the position of Reichsorganisationsleiter. When Hitler took over the trade unions, he promised a German Labour Front, and Robert Ley was placed in control of this. He was a figurehead for workers, and he needed to keep them in submission. Hitler wanted maximum output for low wages for the nation, but inside of his role he even invited Edward VIII, the abdicated British king, who was now known as the Duke of Windsor, and his partner Wallis Simpson, for a tour of Germany. Ley hosted them and chaperoned them. However, during one engagement, he was so drunk that he crashed the Duke of Windsor's car into a gate. Ley began to abuse his position in power, and he gave himself a huge salary, and also even stole more money from the roles he was overseeing, and he embezzled a huge amount of funds. He owned many villas and cars, and was said to have been a womanising and heavy-drinking beast, who was often liable to embarrassing public scenes. Even his second wife in December 1942 shot herself after she and Ley had a drunken brawl, and he was incredibly corrupt. It was said that the DAF, the German Labour Front, quickly began to gain a reputation as perhaps the most corrupt of all the major institutes of the Third Reich. For this, Ley himself had to shoulder a large part of the blame. But one of his biggest campaigns for workers inside the nation was the Strength Through Joy initiative, in which many German workers were given significant benefits and access to facilities, including heavily subsidised holidays and breaks, and a cruise liner for this was even named after him. His group also offered sports coaching, trips to concerts, and even gave people the opportunity to own the people's car, the Volkswagen. During World War II, he needed to ensure that the workforce was productive for the German armaments industry and for the Wehrmacht, but during the war his drunkenness and erratic behaviour was less tolerated, and others such as Albert Speer and Fritz Todt superseded him in the eyes of Hitler and the importance of him to the Reich. Many foreign workers arrived to work, but Ley had little power over them, but he was implicated in the mistreatment of foreign slave labourers. It was claimed that during a meeting, the key item on the agenda was the question of how to treat the Russians. Robert Ley, as usual, was drunk, and when Ley got drunk, he was prone to speak his mind. With so much at stake, there was no room for compassion or civility. No degree of coercion was too much, and Ley expected the mine managers to back up their foremen in meting out the necessary discipline. As Ley put it, When a Russian pig has to be beaten, it would be the ordinary German worker who would have to do it. Robert Ley remained in Hitler's good books until the end of the war, and he was part of the inner circle. He had other roles, including dealing with housing following the Allied bombing campaigns on German cities and towns. He did know about the extermination and concentration camps and what was happening in them, and he claimed that if the Germans would have lost the war, that every German man, woman and child would be exterminated. But one of the strangest ideas he became obsessed with towards the end of the war was the development of a Nazi death ray, and he claimed that, "I've studied the documentation, there's no doubt about it, this will be a decisive weapon." But at the end of the Second World War, Robert Ley was arrested by American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. He last saw Hitler on his birthday in Berlin, outside the Führer bunker, and he thought Hitler would make a last stand in the National Redoubt in the Alpine region. Ley, inside of custody, claimed he was Dr. Ernst Distelmeyer, and he was identified, and he stated that, "You can torture or beat me or impale me on a stake, but I will never doubt the greater deeds of Hitler." He was indicted at the Nuremberg trials and charged with conspiracy to wage an aggressive war, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, and these charges greatly offended Robert Ley. He was furious about them, and he claimed to a psychiatrist that, "Stand us against a wall and shoot us, well and good, you are victors, but why should I be brought before a tribunal like, I can't even get the word out, a criminal?" Ley died by his own hand days later, inside of his prison cell. It was said of his death that, through the opening in the door, only a prisoner's legs were visible when he sat in the recessed toilet alcove. Each guard was responsible for 4 cells. At 8:10 p.m, when the corporal of the guard came by to collect the prisoner's eyeglasses, the sentinel had passed by Ley's door on 4 leisurely rounds, during which Ley had apparently not moved. To the demand by the corporal for Ley's glasses, there was no response. The corporal unlocked the door. Ley, his arms and head dangling limply, was suspended grotesquely by the towel. Though Dr. Flöcker administered a heart stimulant and attempted artificial respiration for 20 minutes, Ley could not be revived. After an autopsy was performed, his body, placed in a box, lined with butcher's paper, was taken the same night to the Nuremberg cemetery, where it was interred in an unmarked grave. But one of the psychiatrists, Dr. Douglas M. Kelly, asked following his death to analyse the brain of Robert Ley, as he suspected that he had suffered with some form of condition or psychiatric disorder. To Kelly, Ley's angry outbursts in prison and his struggling, stammering speech led to him believing he had a frontal lobe injury to the brain. When Ley took the Rorschach test, Ley misnamed colours and was very confused when he described images, and his answers lacked sense or context and seemed very random. This was further evidence of Ley's deteriorating brain, in Kelly's opinion. When Ley's body was brought to the autopsy, Dr. Kelly asked one of his colleagues to remove the brain of Robert Ley from his head, and the brain was then smuggled out of the Nuremberg prison, and it was passed to Dr. Haymaker, a neuropathologist at the Army Institute of Pathology in Washington. Robert Ley's brain crossed the Atlantic, and his body was left in Nuremberg. Kelly asked Haymaker to examine Ley's brain for signs of frontal lobe damage, and Haymaker, when he looked at the brain, confirmed that Robert Ley, the head of the German Labour Front, had suffered from a long-standing degenerative process of the frontal lobes. This confirmed that Robert Ley was suffering with mental illness and problems with his brain, probably caused by the plane crash during the First World War. Ley clearly had brain abnormalities, and it was said of these that they were of a lesser scope than they first believed, but they were still there. Kelly's research concluded that the Nazis did not share personality traits, but the analysis of Robert Ley's brain could have had profound effects. If this had been detected whilst Ley was alive, then without doubt he would have been declared not fit enough to stand trial, and would not have been charged, and would probably have been institutionalised for many years and the rest of his life, or even could have just been let out to society. The discovery of the frontal lobe injury on Robert Ley's brain explained a number of different problems with his behaviour, and also could have led to his stammer and erratic behaviour. He had, in the words of the man that analysed his body, a long-standing degenerative process of the frontal lobes. However, today the brain of Robert Ley most probably is inside of an archive in America. Because of his high-profile status, it is probable that the brain does still exist and was not thrown away. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.